tell them, look, I'm here for you if you ever need to talk. My sister used to write me notes, like on a card. I'm sorry, I don't know how to help you, but just know that I'm here for you, right?
Are you hiding in a box?
Have the pressures of life become so daunting that you put walls up?
Are you finding that you are constantly tired as you spend your days performing just to function?
In today's episode, we interview Cathelina Duvert, the author of The Box, where she shares how she overcame depression by recognizing the box she had created.
Discover how she learned how to tear down the walls bit by bit. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Rewrite Your Story, the podcast where change begins with you.
We're your hosts, Stephen and Sharlene.
As professional coaches and mentors trained in various modalities, we have helped hundreds of people
Bridge the gap between the person they are
and the person they want to be.
We bring you conversations with real people who have overcome real setbacks.
You will walk away with practical steps to find more clarity, alignment, and success in any area you want to improve.
So join us and discover how you have the power to overcome, to change, and to rewrite your story.
So pick up the pen. Your new chapter starts now.
So, Cathelina, you've got a very interesting story, and it's led you to write your book, which is The Box, I believe. So tell me a little bit about the journey of how you actually came to the realization that you wanted to write this book to help people struggling with mental health.
So about 25 years ago, I was always suffering with depression. However, I did not know what I was going through. If you recall, like about 25, 30 years ago, we weren't really talking about depression like we are now. So in an effort to understand what I was going through, I started writing a story about a woman who is going through emotional turmoil and how she doesn't understand what she's going through. And it was because I was going through depression and I didn't understand depression at the time. And it wasn't until a few years later, I'm going to say maybe 3 or 4 years later, when I was diagnosed with depression, that I realized, oh, okay, that's what my main character is going through. And so it started off as an attempt for me to understand what I was going through and an attempt for me to help myself. And then it branched into something that I can do, a story I can share with others to help other people. So that's how it started.
Oh, I love that. And so it's a novel.
It's a novel, yes.
That is so cool because you get a lot of people writing about depression and writing about mental illness, and it's so factual and you know, like clinical.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely.
As a counselor, you probably read a lot of those types of.
It's so refreshing to have just that fictional sort of feel to it, so you can actually be taken on a journey and actually enjoy the process rather than just having facts thrown at you.
Exactly. And you know what I did when I realized when I was diagnosed with depression, I did a lot of research on it online to understand what depression was, what different types of depression was out there, what medications were used, how the medications worked. I did all of that research, including my own research with not even research, but personal experience with therapy and with medication. And I threw it all into the novel in a way that wasn't as preachy, right? So my main character is seeing a therapist and her therapist gives her the information that I learned through the research. You know what I mean? So that's what I tried to do with that.
I just love that because, you know, it would really bypass critical factor when the reader is reading it and really go at an unconscious level, like having that metaphor approach. Your book is called The Box. Why the box? Like what is the box in your experience?
So in the book, the box has several different meanings. It is a metaphor for depression. And what my main character realizes upon meeting a painter who painted a painting called The Box, and it's just a woman in a fetal position struggling with emotional turmoil. And there's no box around, but the idea of the box is that this woman has created not just walls around herself to avoid people from reaching her, but she created an entire box to make sure that nobody reaches her. And in her depressive state, she feels like she's trapped in a box and she's unable to, or rather unwilling to get out of that box to experience the light, to experience other people trying to help her.
That is so powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How would a person, speaking to our audiences now and our listeners, how would a person recognize if they're in a box?
If they if they are avoiding people trying to reach out to them, if they are staying indoors and not going out to experience life, going out to parties or gatherings or just to have dinner or lunch with somebody, someone who is all inward, inside of themselves and not living life to the fullest. Because I'm only speaking from experience, obviously, because that's how I was. I'm a teacher. And in the summers, I didn't really look forward to the summertime because the summertime meant that was my own time. And now I needed to do something, right, with my own time. During the school months, I know what I'm doing every single day. I'm going to work. I'm playing a part, right? I'm acting with students, being a teacher. But in the summertime, I was alone. I was in my room. People would say, oh, you should go, since you have the summers off, you should go to the museum. You should go do this. You should go travel. I would say, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But inward, I did not want to do that. I just wanted to stay home and by myself. I did not want to go out. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. And even thinking about leaving the house to just go outside for a walk was anxiety ridden for me, right? So that was me in my depressive state. I did not want to go out of my box, which was my home, my apartment. I did not want to go out. So somebody who is all about themselves and is not willing to go out and explore and engage with other people and with nature, I would say that they need to start thinking about what's going on inside of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, because it can be quite scary, isn't it? Because when you've gotten to that point where you're building these walls around you that's obviously there for a reason, you're trying to protect yourself from something, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Kathleen, I'm just curious. You said like you were going through stuff and you got diagnosed with depression and realized that was the character in your book that you were writing, your journaling time. My question is, what made you seek support in order to be diagnosed? Was there something that happened? Was there people saying, hey, Cathelina, this is not normal? Like, what was it that actually you thought, yeah, I need to do something?
So I have a twin sister. We're very, very close. And all through our teenage years and college years, when I was going through my depressive state, she would be like, what's wrong with you? You know, why are you crying? Nothing has happened. Why are you so upset? Why are you behaving this way? And finally, in my mid-20s, I don't even remember if it was when I started writing my novel or if it was after. There was one evening where we were just hanging out and I started crying and she's like, this is enough. You need help. And she actually took out the yellow pages because back then that's what we used. It wasn't the internet just yet. She started looking for therapists for me. And I was like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. Because I realized that it was time as well. For some reason, it was hard for me to do this on my own. I needed my sister to do it for me. So she's the one who reached out and she found a therapist for me and I'm the one who made the appointment. And after, and I started seeking therapy and that's when I was diagnosed with depression. Before that, I didn't understand it. So it was my sister who helped me take that step.
Wow. And you know what? Good on you for actually following through as well, because that takes courage.
During this whole process, when you're going through, like you've started writing the book and you started realizing your character's going through something and as part of this therapy, you notice this is, all of a sudden, like you realize your character is identified as you and you're noticing it's what she's going through and so it sort of builds on that with your therapy. Were you able to identify any self-care strategies that your character was able to use and that's something that you found helpful for yourself?
Well, in an effort to make my novel interesting, she doesn't use any self-care strategies because, I have to make her suffer throughout the book, but I started utilizing some strategies and I found them completely by accident. So let me explain. So my sister and two of my cousins were extremely close and we started challenging each other with exercise. Every day we would exercise and we would put it on a board, that we exercised for that day. We turned it into a game. And then we took it a little bit further. We started sharing motivational videos with each other on YouTube. Let's listen to this, cousin. This was really cool. Oh, this one is really great. And then we started talking about meditating. And so we would exchange different meditations that we found on YouTube that helped us. And then through this process of exercise, therapy, motivational videos, and self-affirmations, I realized that I was feeling better for months at a time. So, and it wasn't until a few months later where I realized, oh my gosh, the exercise has been helping me. But it wasn't just the exercise. I later realized that I was doing a number of things at the same time that sort of helped me overcome depression in a way that I no longer needed medication. So I found these strategies completely by accident. And it was through the help of my sister, and it was through the help of my cousins. And that's why I feel like it's so important that we need people around us to help us out of our depressive funk. You know what I mean? So yeah, those were the strategies that I utilized, and I found them by accident.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. And you can see like your whole mind body connection there, like the meditation for the mind, and you know, I just had a thought, and you know, Sharlene and I speak about this quite often. What advice would you give someone that knows someone is struggling through something, knows something is happening? Actually, I've got another question as well. So knows something is happening. What advice would you give to that person to go and speak to the other person? Because some people would say, well, that's their life, that's their business, I don't want to intrude. But then there's the other side of the equation, and Sharlene and I have witnessed this quite recently, that people actually don't have an idea of what that person is going through until sometimes it's too late. So I guess my question is, what advice would you give someone who's going through something for a loved one to speak to them? And the second question is, what signs should people be aware of?
So what signs should people be aware of? Somebody who is constantly speaking in the negative. Oh, my life is crap. And oh, I can never do anything right. And I feel so stupid. You know, somebody like that who's self-deprecating, their emotional self-esteem is very low. And if they feel like that about themselves, well, what must they feel like on a regular basis? If they're saying that out loud, they must be feeling that on a regular basis and saying probably much worse to themselves when they're alone. So any talk, any negative talk, self-deprecating talk, someone who feels like there is no point to living, someone who feels like there's no point to doing anything to advance their lives, to feel good about themselves, to feel good about life, I would say those are certain signs. Someone who, obviously, as I spoke about before, who is always staying in, not wanting to go outside or enjoy life or enjoy other people or parties. Those are probably some signs. Of course, I'm not speaking as an expert. I'm speaking from my own experience and some other people who I've known who suffered with depression. A piece of advice that I would give to them is to make sure that the person that they know that's suffering knows that they're there, right? Tell them, look, I'm here for you if you ever need to talk. My sister used to write me notes, like on a card. I'm sorry, I don't know how to help you, but just know that I'm here for you, right? Just letting them know that you are there, that you're not judging them, I think it's really helpful. And also you could gently say, listen, I feel like I don't know how to help you. So I'm just gonna call somebody, or I'm gonna try to look into finding somebody that yet you can talk to if you're not comfortable talking to me. Maybe reaching out in the sense that this is what I'm gonna do for you. How do you feel about that? Right? Not just saying, listen, this is ridiculous. You know what? I'm going to find you a therapist. I'm going to find somebody to talk to, but being gentle with it, I would say. Those are the two pieces of advice that I would give.
Yeah, absolutely. Because sometimes, again, so often fall into a trap of saying, well, oh, you know, you should do this, or you should try this, or you should try this. And then like it's having all this stuff just bombarding them, right? And then, like how you said, just being gentle, checking in with them and saying, have you considered this? Is this something you could look into?
Yeah, I think that helps. I remember there was one time there was a coworker at my job who was always putting herself down and saying things that didn't make sense because she had accomplished so much, and I yelled at her, and I was just like, what are you talking about? You're always saying these things, or you should look at the accomplishments that you made. And then it wasn't until later I was like, why did you yell at her like that? It was because I was seeing in her what I used to be like. And I wanted to snap it out of her, but that wasn't the way to do it. And then later I apologized to her and she looked at me, she's like, no, I needed to hear that. Maybe some people need to hear that, but at the same time, I feel like that's not the way to go. Being gentle, I think, is because you just don't know what the person is going through. That particular woman needed to hear it that way, but you don't know if, I didn't know if that's what she needed at the time, but I think gentle is more of a way to go.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. You know, you spoke before about working as a school teacher and the summer holidays being totally, you know, you're freaking out because that routine was taken away. I can imagine that's quite exhausting performing, because I would imagine that depression is always there. You know, I know there have been times in my life that I've been down and, you know, sometimes you're active so that you can do your job.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that was quite exhausting for you.
Yes, it was exhausting. And you feel it physically in your body. Every evening going home, I was left depleted. And I didn't quite understand why. But at the same time, I have to admit that if it wasn't for my acting in the classroom and around my colleagues as well, because they didn't know, if it wasn't for my acting, I feel like I would have gone down a darker path, you know, and I'm forced right now to think about Robin Williams. Everyone loved Robin Williams. He's so funny, charismatic actor and comedian, but he took his own life and he suffered with something that nobody else could help, that he felt that nobody else could help with. I think anybody who is a depressive and has to be functioning on a day-to-day is acting. And a lot of times we understand that depressives are always feeling exhausted. They're always wanting to stay in bed. And I think that's part of it, because we're always acting. We have to function. We have to play that part. And I think you're right. It was quite exhausting for me. And I always felt like, oh, you know, I'm just tired. I just need more vitamins. But I think that you're right, that's part of the reason why I was always acting. I was always putting on a performance.
I think that's so powerful. And you know what? You're probably given a lot of insight to a lot of listeners that haven't really figured out what's going on for them and why they're so tired. So thank you for doing that and being so vulnerable. As you were coming out of and realizing and started exercising, how did you start to tear open the box and overcome that social anxiety?
It's funny because a lot of the times I don't think I've fully opened that box for myself. I still suffer with social anxiety. It's to the point where, you know, I've just self-published this novel, and every day, like even yesterday, my mind was made up. Okay, today you're going to go to the library, you're going to go to the bookstores, you're going to introduce yourself, you're going to tell them about the book. I can't. To step outside that door with the sole purpose of promoting myself gives me terrible anxiety, even till this day. And I mentioned in a recent podcast that for a very long time, I relied on alcohol to help me overcome social anxiety. So I used to always hang out with my colleagues at work, and they thought that I was so much fun. Why? Because every time we went, I was drinking a whole lot to feel comfortable. I never felt comfortable in social situations, but I was fun Kathy. Best believe I'm going to drink until I get tipsy. And then sometimes I would drink until I got drunk where I blacked out. The next day I'd wake up, I'd be like, I don't know what happened yesterday. But everybody's like, oh my gosh, yesterday was so much fun, Kathy. Yes. You know, that's a problem. And so I'm still trying to help myself overcome that social anxiety. And even when I was in therapy, my therapist, who knew that I love to write, she was like, why don't you write a story where you overcome this social anxiety? You do something to overcome it. And I did, and it made me feel good. And the next time that I went out, I tried to overcome this, and it's baby steps. Even though that one time I went to a party and I didn't drink and I felt like an outsider still, the next time when I went out, I was just like, I can't do that again. I feel too uncomfortable, so I would drink. So I'm still struggling through it. In terms of coming out of that box, sharing my story is helping me come out of my box, but there are still some parts of my anxiety that I keep inside that box that I'm still struggling with. And I'm trying.
Oh, I love your honesty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I speak a lot around imposter syndrome, and the effects that imposter syndrome has had on my life. And I totally relate because there's an element of social anxiety with me as well. And it's got a lot to do with, imposter syndrome. So thank you so much, because people need to realize there's not this magic one day that, okay, I'm cured, I'm healed. It is a daily process, and it is a marathon, and sometimes it's a lifelong journey.
I love that you said it's a marathon.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, a lot of what I'm hearing from you, as well as this a big component of self-compassion as well. Like you're having all these strategies, you're putting them in place. I'd like to ask you a little bit more about that later. But you're noticing that even though, like, you'll have days when it doesn't always work, and you're okay with that.
Yeah.
And that's just a learning process.
I'm not always okay with it.
Yeah.
I still find myself beating myself up mentally. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, the worst that could happen is if I go to a library or bookstore and say, look, I just published a book. Would you like to carry it? What's the worst that can happen? They can say no. They're not going to laugh me out of the store, but I still go through it. And sometimes sometimes I am a little hard on myself, but that's where the meditation comes in. So I have a lot of meditations from YouTube saved on my phone about you are an excellent writer and you can do this. And, I'd have to listen to them on a regular basis. It's like feeding myself every single day in order to go out and do the courageous thing. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were talking about some cues that you can listen to even in yourself is your own self-talk. And that your own self-talk can actually be something that can give you an idea. Are you going through some sort of depression? What are some strategies you use when you find that your self-talk isn't supporting you at that time?
I know when I'm telling myself things that are keeping me from being my best, I have to sit back and say, okay, Kathy, what's really bothering you right now? What is it? Right? Sometimes it's a source. Maybe I had an argument with my sister that morning and I'm feeling low about it. And sometimes it's just me being me. So the strategies that I use, again, I had mentioned it prior to the interview. I have this prayer that I say. I say, the Lord is with me, the Lord is by my side. The Lord is with me, the Lord is by my side. It's like my mantra. I just keep saying it. The Lord is with me, the Lord is by my side. And it started off many years ago, when I used to say, please, Lord, be with me. Please be by my side. And then I had to shift that because I know the Lord is always with me. So I had to shift it to the Lord is with me. The Lord is by my side. The Lord is with me. The Lord is by my side. And I keep saying it over and over again. And sometimes that gives me the courage to do what I need to do. Or sometimes it just helps me through, like it helps block out the negative talk so that I can do what I need to do. So that's one strategy that I use.
Yeah. And I love that. And it just reminds me of Romans 8, where it says, casting down all imaginations and every high thing and bringing every thought captive to the obedience of Christ.
Oh, I like that.
And by repeating that mantra, you're actually bringing those thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ by saying he is actually with me.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Saying it as it is, not like as a request, but it is.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
Love that.
So good. I was just wondering, please, Cathelina, how can individuals build resilience to actually better cope with life challenges? What are some little tips I can give them?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I really feel like, okay, so this is what I'm going to say. We are all, I feel, put here for a reason. We all have something in us that we're meant to share with others. And I think in a way that's our creativity, whether it is creatively dancing, gardening, writing in my case, podcasting in your case, right? I feel like we all need to immerse ourselves in the thing that makes us tick, that thing that we feel like we cannot live without. I feel like if we really use that and go inside of ourselves and really think about what is it that drives your passion, I feel like you can use that to uplift yourself, and then you will be able to uplift others. Does that make I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense, because
Okay.
you look at, when we're teaching coaches and when we're doing our, certification courses, we actually tell people that when you're the most fulfilled in life is when you're aligning with your passion and purpose.
Yeah, yes.
And it's when you're away from passion and purpose that you feel like the depression, the things like that come in, because you're not in line with your true self. And it's passion and purpose that directs us and drives us. I know with me, if I'm not teaching, training, and motivating, then I'm not in line with my passion and purpose.
Right.
Whereas Sharlene, yours is, when you're listening to people and supporting them in that coaching, nurturing, you're in passion.
Encouraging.
So totally get what you're saying. And I think that's so important. And I think the sad thing is that not many people know what their passion is or their purpose is.
Yeah. So like now the question, I guess, is how do we find our purpose? How do we find our passion? Like I said before, writing was always with me. It wasn't one day I was like, let me start writing about. I started writing even at a very young age. I remember I used to like take a full sheet of paper. I would fold it in half and draw lines around across it and write little books. And I would give it to my dad so that he can read it, because my father loved reading. And he always fell asleep while he was reading books. And if he fell asleep reading my book, yes, So so that was always something with me. So if people don't understand or know what their passion is, just think back to when you were a child. What was it that you really loved to do, right? What was it that really drove you, that thing, like I said, that thing that you feel like you can't live without? I can't live without my writing. I can't. I'm always writing something, whether it's a short poem, blog, my novel, my stories. Find that thing and see if it brings out that thing in you that helps you counteract those negative feelings, those negative thoughts.
That is just perfect, Yeah, that is just so well said, because, I look at, one of my relatives has a passion for restaurants and cooking, and his TikTok is all about cooking. And I'm like, I couldn't think of anything worse.
Right.
Like, I hate cooking, but he loves it, and that's his passion and that's his life now. So it's whatever drives you, and I think of him growing up around my auntie, around the wood oven and making pizza. And whereas me, I was like, I'll eat the pizza, but I'm not cooking the pizza.
I love that.
So I get what you're saying.
Just thinking on that note, like I've heard many times, like people have this little thing that when they're being able to identify something that really lights them up from when they was a kid, but they've forgotten about it growing up because they've been told, no, that's just stupid. You're wasting your time. And then they forget about it, put it behind them, and they forget what actually lights them up. How do they get back to that? How do they overcome the negative connotation around what actually used to light them up?
I guess they have to start defying other people, right? My main character in my novel, The Box, her mother, so my main character, Mia Hill, loved writing stories. And her mother was like, you know what, how can you motivate and elevate our people that way? So put that away, try to find a better use for your talents. And this is one of the things that caused her depression and her trauma. And she found a career that was closely aligned to writing. So she went into the magazine publishing industry, closely aligned to her writing. But when she realized that, oh my gosh, this is the reason why I was suffering with my depression and what my mother told me or whatever. And she was finally able to use her talent in a way that still touched people, because she was closely aligned with that. And she realized what had happened. So maybe, I don't know. I'm no expert, but I'm speaking from experience here. Just like you said, Stephen, going back to your childhood, right? Defying other people, thinking about, well, what was it that people tried to shut you off from? Why did they try to do that? Figure out what it is, what makes you love that thing so much that you're going to defy those people, what is it that you cannot live without?
Yes.
And you know what? It just goes back to how our parents' words can really,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
And well-meaning, you know, a lot
Yeah,
of them
absolutely.
because they don't understand, you know, they've been told, you know, this is what you got to do. So you can't have time for dreams and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So they have to, they end up quenching someone else's dreams because that's all they know how to do.
And you know what? When we look at, you know, I would say, Cathelina, you're a very similar age to myself and Sharlene, and we're first generation Australian. You're a first generation American. You're a child of immigrants. We're both child of immigrants, and they came and they worked hard. You know, your parents would have worked hard to establish a new life, and so that working hard became the norm, and they wanted that to continue, not realizing that they actually made it possible for us to live the life we were destined to live.
I so agree. And my parents, yes, are both from Haiti, and they were hard working people. But one thing that I really appreciate is that they never shot me down when I talked about my writing. But like I said, my father would read my stories. One time I was at the typewriter before computers and I was typing up my poems, and my mom was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to put this into a book." And my mom's like, "Yeah, go for it." You know,
Oh.
they never shot me down, or my sister or my brother, but we understood their hard work, and we understood that they were doing it for us. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I love it.
Such a good relationship to see that support.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
important.
You know, going back to earlier, you spoke about your sister making you getting the yellow pages out, and you took the step to seek therapy. And obviously, the therapist was encouraging you to write. What would you say to that person that knows they need help, but won't make that first step to seek help or seek a therapist?
Okay, so I'm going to say that, and I know it's hard, and I know because when you're depressed, you just want to be by yourself. You don't want to talk to anybody, but it's so important. Community, friendships are so important. So I would say to that person who is not making that first step, maybe to talk to somebody, to ask them to be there with them, or to make that first step for them. Because even though they're not making that first step by themselves, the important thing is that they get there, you know? To somebody who really does not want that help, it's so hard because you really need to, inside yourself, know that you really need to be ready for that, to take that step, right? So I would say to that person, just hold on, find that one trusted person to share ideas with, to help you, to maybe come along with you to that therapy appointment, to make that phone call, or be there with you to make that phone call if you're ready for that. Because I really feel like you're not going to get anywhere until you're ready. My main character, Mia, even though she was in therapy for a long time, she was still fighting it, right? But it wasn't until she felt like she was ready that she was able to open up to her therapist and really start the healing work.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Sharlene, I want to hear from you.
Yeah.
As a counselor who's worked with many people, would you say in response to what Cathelina has said?
Yeah, absolutely. From what I'm hearing, like a lot of people tend to actually identify, like a lot of times when people don't want to make a change, they've actually identified with that depression or that feeling or emotion. And instead of seeing it just as something that's just they're experiencing in the moment, they've taken it on themselves as an identity. Oh, that's me. I'm depressed. I'm this, or I'm angry. That's just who I am now. And if they change, that's who are they anymore? Like they become someone different and they don't know what to do with that.
My main character, Mia, goes through that. She's like, this is who I am. This is how I feel most comfortable.
Yeah.
So the question is then, how do we break them from identifying with that depression? Yeah. That's not something that we want to hold on to. It's limiting their lives. Like sometimes I feel like I'm 49 now. I'm going to be 50 in 2 weeks, but I don't remember my 30s because I spent it in a depressive fog. So I feel like we need to help them step away from that identity of depression, or else their whole lives are going to pass by them. They're not going to know what happened. They're not going to remember their lives.
Powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like, one of the tools I was that has come up many times for me is something that I call a roadmap. And it's like, you've got 4 segments. You got like moments of sunshine, rain, growth, and like rainbows and pain. And like, you got all these different areas of your life that you can look at. And sometimes they merge together. They don't always stay separate. They kind of come together. When you have bad times, you'll have something amazing come along because of that bad time. And you experience a new friendship that maybe develops out of that. And sometimes having those type of tools helps people just to get out of that little box and start thinking, okay, there's not just that area of life. There's not just this part. Where there's, darkness, there's going to be some kind of light that just shines through, helping them to see outside of, just that one thing. There's so many complex natures about life.
I know. Life can be so beautiful, but we understand that there's pain too. But to help a depressive understand that, somebody who's suffering with depression, it's quite challenging. That's why I feel like they really need to want to get out of that depressive state. And you can't force anybody to want that,
Absolutely.
right? You could only be there for them and let them know that you'll always be there.
And I think that's important. I think it's, if anyone's going through something, recently we attended a funeral of someone who, was depressed and, through circumstances passed away. And I remember the priest during the, what do they call it, homily?
Probably, yeah.
Asked people to hold the hand of the person next to him and said, you can feel that hand next to you. Know that there's never a time in your life when someone's not going to be there to hold your hand. And I thought that was a very powerful reminder in the time that there's always someone there to help you.
Yeah, to reach out, even if it's just to be with you during that hard time, like to not be alone, know that you're not alone in that darkness. Yes, you might want to stay in darkness. Yes, you might not want to branch out and do something to change at the stage because you're not ready yet. But knowing that there are people there that are willing just to sit with you until you are ready, that can be a big change.
That can be, absolutely.
Cathelina, you said something before which is very dear to Sharlene and my heart. And we share this at almost every podcast. And you alluded to it. Healing happens in community. And we talk about that a lot. And you just mentioned you need a community. In your experience, tell us how important community has been for you.
My experience, as I mentioned before, my sister really was there for me when she didn't understand what I was going through. She never gave up on me. And then, as I mentioned before, 2 of my cousins, Marie Jewett and Marie Louise, they were always calling. And my cousins sometimes suffer with depression too. So whenever we, know that we're going through something, we make it a conference call. So-and-so needs help. Come on, let's do this. Are you ready? Are you available tonight at 5? Okay, let's do this. And my experience has been that my family is my community, that they will drop what they need to drop in order to be there for each other. And it doesn't have to be family. It could be your found family, friends, acquaintance. I don't know. Anybody who you trust is there. And there was a book that I read. It's a book called Queenie, Candace, and I think they recently made a series on it on Hulu. And the main character, she has her work friends, her best friend, her cousin, and they don't know each other, but they all come together on a group chat so they can help Queenie out. You know what I mean? So it could be a number of people from different areas of your life, but that's so important. So in my experience, I could not have survived if it wasn't for my cousins and my sister, that community, because they never gave up on me. Every time I was low, they were like, okay, let's get on the phone. We need to, and we don't all live next to each other. They live in different states, but we always made it a point to be there for each other.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So precious.
Cathelina, if someone wants to reach out to you, we will definitely include your socials in our podcast notes. And if they want to grab your book, where would they go?
So right now they can go on Amazon. It's available there. The Box by Cathelina Duvert. They can also reach me on my Instagram, where I have a link to all my socials, and my Instagram is Cathelina Duvert as well. And yeah, and I have a link there that they can buy a copy straight from me, so they can get it autographed if they want to, or they can go on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And also message me on Instagram. I'm always happy to interact.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
finally, what is next in your chapter?
Well, the next few weeks, since I have the summer off, I'm going to step on that courage that I have. I'm going to try to promote my novel by going to the different bookstores in my area and the library. And also I am starting to work on a new novel about a pair of twin sisters and their story with their family. And I'm looking forward to that one.
Awesome.
That's
Thank
so
you so much,
awesome.
Cathelina, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us on the Rewrite Your Story podcast.
We hope you found this episode enlightening.
For more information on the topics discussed, please visit our website at stephenandsharlene.com.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, share it with your friends, and follow us on social media at Stephen and Sharlene.
Until next time, stay informed and inspired.
This is Stephen and Sharlene signing off from the Rewrite Your Story podcast. Thank you and stay blessed.